Have you ever felt disconnected from your own life, overwhelmed by constant notifications, endless responsibilities, and the pressure to keep up? That sense of being trapped in a world that demands everything from you while giving very little back. This is what modern life often feels like, a kind of internal exile. You might be surrounded by people, yet feel profoundly alone. You might have more comforts than any generation in history, yet feel strangely powerless. It's as if you're living in a foreign land, disconnected from your own potential, your own peace, your own strength. But what if this feeling isn't a problem to be solved, but an invitation? An invitation to rediscover a kind of power that no external circumstance can ever take away from you. 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, who was himself exiled multiple times, wrote, "Exile is not an evil, for it places you in a condition to practice virtue more intensely." Think about that for a moment. He's not just saying you can survive exile, he's saying you can use it, you can turn it into fuel. This is the profound, counterintuitive wisdom of Stoicism, an ancient philosophy that teaches us how to find freedom not by changing our circumstances, but by changing ourselves. It's about realizing that the walls you feel closing in around you might just be the very things that force you to build an inner citadel, a fortress of mind and spirit that can withstand anything life throws your way. In this video, we're going to explore 21 timeless lessons from history's greatest exiles, men and women who were cast out, imprisoned, or ostracized, yet somehow emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and more powerful than before. Through their stories and the practical philosophy of Stoicism, we'll learn how to transform our own feelings of isolation, overwhelm, and powerlessness into sources of unshakable inner strength. This isn't about abstract ideas, it's about real, actionable wisdom you can use starting today. Whether you're facing personal setbacks, professional challenges, or simply the quiet ache of modern disconnection, these lessons will show you how to reclaim your agency, find peace amid chaos, and discover that the most profound power has been within you all along. The first lesson from exile is that your mind is the one thing no one can take from you. Think about that for a moment. They can take your home, your possessions, your status, even your freedom of movement. But they cannot take your ability to choose how you respond. This is the absolute bedrock of Stoic philosophy, a principle known as the dichotomy of control. It's the simple but profound idea that some things are within our power while others are not. Our judgments, our values, our intentions, our reactions, these are always up to us. Everything else, from what other people say about us to the circumstances we find ourselves in, is ultimately not within our direct control. The exiles we're learning from, like Seneca, who was banished to Corsica, or Epictetus, who lived his entire life as a slave and then an exile, understood this distinction better than anyone. Their physical freedom was stripped away, but they realized that true power isn't about commanding external events. It's about commanding yourself. It's about realizing that the only thing you ever really control is your own mind. This brings us to one of the most famous teachings from Epictetus, who said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." A difficult situation, in and of itself, doesn't have the power to make you miserable. It's your opinion about that situation, the story you tell yourself about it, that creates your suffering. A rainy day is just a meteorological event. Your judgment that it ruins your plans is what creates the frustration. For someone in exile, the banishment is a fact. Their judgment that it is a crushing defeat or an unbearable injustice is what would destroy them. But if they can shift that judgment, if they can see it as an opportunity for reflection, for writing, for inner development, then the exact same circumstance becomes a source of strength. This is the invincibility of inner judgment. It turns every obstacle into a different kind of opportunity simply by changing how you look at it. We see this play out again and again in history. Consider the countless political dissidents, artists, and thinkers who were sent away from their homelands. Many of them succumbed to despair, defined entirely by their loss. But the ones we remember, the ones who left a legacy, are those who focused not on what was taken from them, but on what they still had. They maintained their dignity by fiercely protecting their inner world. They chose to see themselves not as victims of a cruel fate, but as students of a difficult lesson. They directed their energy inward, focusing on their character, their principles, and their work, rather than wasting it on raging against things they could not change. Their power came from this relentless focus on the one arena where they were still the undisputed masters, their own judgments. Now bring this into your own life. You may not be literally exiled on a remote island, but you certainly face situations that make you feel powerless, a frustrating commute, a difficult conversation, a project that isn't going your way. In that moment, the Stoic question is not, how can I change this immediately? But first, what is my judgment here? Are you telling yourself this is a catastrophe? Are you convinced it's unfair? That judgment is the source of your distress. So the practice, the real inner work, is to pause and consciously choose a different judgment. What if this delay is a chance to listen to an audiobook? What if this difficult person is a test of my patience? What if this setback is simply feedback? By shifting your judgment, you don't change the external event, but you completely transform your experience of it. You reclaim your power from the situation and put it back where it has always belonged, in your own hands. What if the very discomfort you spend so much energy avoiding is actually the secret source of your strength? This is the counterintuitive and powerful second lesson from exile. When you are cast out, comfort is not an option. You are forced to endure cold, hunger, and uncertainty. But the Stoics noticed something remarkable. Those who not only endured this forced hardship, but learned to embrace it voluntarily often developed a resilience that was unshakable. They realized that by deliberately seeking out manageable discomfort in their daily lives, they could inoculate themselves against the shock of future misfortune. It was a form of training, a way to build the mental and emotional muscle required to remain calm and capable when life inevitably turned difficult. Exile, in a strange way, became the ultimate gym for the soul, where comfort was the weight that built inner fortitude. The Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus was a powerful advocate for this practice. He didn't just talk about it, he lived it. Despite being from a prominent family, he actively chose a life of simplicity. He wore rough clothing, ate plain food, and slept on a hard bed. He did this not out of masochism, but as a deliberate exercise in self-mastery. His reasoning was brilliant. If you become accustomed to a life of luxury, the loss of that luxury will feel like a catastrophe. But if you regularly practice living with less, then you have nothing to fear from loss. You have already proven to yourself that you can thrive without it. This practice transforms your relationship with the world. You stop seeing comfort as a necessity and start seeing it as a pleasant occasional bonus. Your sense of security shifts from being dependent on external things to being rooted in your own proven ability to handle their absence. This idea is echoed beautifully by Seneca, who advised in his letters, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" He is giving us a direct prescription. He isn't saying you must live in poverty forever. He is inviting you to conduct a personal experiment. For a few days, consciously choose the harder option. Take the cold shower, walk instead of driving, eat a simple meal, and in that moment of slight discomfort, ask yourself the crucial question: is this really so bad? You will almost always find that the answer is no. The anticipation of the discomfort is almost always far worse than the experience itself. By voluntarily stepping into it, you shatter the illusion that you are fragile. You collect concrete evidence of your own toughness. Now contrast this ancient training with our modern reality. We live in a world engineered for maximum convenience. We have food delivered to our door, climate-controlled environments, and endless entertainment in our pockets. While these things are not evil, they create a dangerous dependency. The more seamless our lives become, the less practice we get in dealing with friction, delay, or hardship. We become like a muscle that has never been used, weak and prone to injury at the slightest strain. When a minor inconvenience occurs, a Wi-Fi outage, a long line, a broken appliance, it feels like a monumental crisis because we have lost our resilience muscle memory. We have outsourced our comfort to external systems, and in doing so, we have unknowingly given away a piece of our self-reliance. History's most resilient exiles understood this instinctively. Consider the countless writers, scientists, and leaders who were imprisoned. While some broke under the pressure, others used the deprivation as a catalyst. They didn't have soft beds or rich food, so they turned inward. They exercised their minds with intricate thought experiments. They memorized poetry. They composed entire books in their heads. Their physical world was stripped bare, which forced them to discover the vast and rich landscape of their inner world. Their voluntary acceptance of their circumstance, their decision to see it as training rather than torture, was what allowed them to not just survive, but to create and innovate within their constraints. They were practicing voluntary discomfort on a grand scale, and it forged them into some of the most powerful minds in history. The invitation for you is to start small, to begin rebuilding that resilience muscle in a world that constantly encourages you to let it atrophy. This week, choose one tiny voluntary discomfort. It could be as simple as leaving your phone in another room for an hour, taking a walk without a podcast, doing one extra repetition at the gym when you want to stop, or eating a meal without any distractions. The goal is not to punish yourself, but to pay attention. Notice the initial resistance your mind throws up. Observe the urge to seek the easier, more comfortable path. And then gently choose the slightly harder one anyway. Afterwards, take a moment to reflect. How did it feel? Did you break? Or did you discover that you were capable of more than you thought? This small act is a quiet rebellion against fragility. It is a direct deposit into your account of inner power, proving that your sense of control comes not from controlling your environment, but from trusting in your ability to handle whatever that environment brings. In exile, you learn very quickly how little you actually need to be at peace. When everything external is stripped away, your home, your routines, the familiar faces and places that defined your life, you are left with a stark and clarifying reality. All the non-essentials vanish, and what remains is the core of your existence, your mind, your character, your ability to perceive and choose. This forced simplification is a brutal but effective teacher, revealing a profound truth that we so often forget in our cluttered modern lives. Happiness is not something you acquire, it is something you cultivate from within. The constant pursuit of more money, more status, more possessions is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of where contentment actually lies. We chase these external things believing they will fill an internal void, but they are like pouring water into a sieve. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They classified all these external trappings as indifferents, things that are neither good nor bad in themselves. A luxurious villa is not inherently good, and a simple hut is not inherently bad. Their value is entirely dependent on how we use them. True good and evil, the Stoics argued, reside only in our choices, our character, and our virtue. A wealthy person can be miserable and corrupt, while a person with very little can be joyful and virtuous. The stuff itself is irrelevant. What matters is the state of the person using it. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, constantly reminded himself of this truth in his private writings. As emperor, he had access to unimaginable wealth and luxury, yet he saw the danger in becoming attached to it. He wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." He would practice envisioning the simplicity of a life without his palaces and banquets, not to punish himself, but to remind his soul that its peace did not depend on them. He knew that dependency on externals is a form of slavery. You become a hostage to fortune, forever anxious about losing what you have or failing to get what you want. But self-sufficiency, the ability to find joy and purpose within the confines of your own mind, is the ultimate freedom. It is the freedom that no exile, no bankruptcy, no disaster can ever take from you. This is the art of contentment with little. It is not about deprivation for its own sake, but about liberating yourself from the endless and exhausting hunger for more. We see this lesson embodied powerfully in the lives of history's exiles. Take the Roman poet Ovid, banished from the glittering heart of the empire to the remote, bleak shores of the Black Sea. In Rome, he had been a celebrated literary star, immersed in a world of social prestige and material comfort. In exile, he was utterly alone, severed from everything he thought defined him. Initially, he was crushed, writing desperate letters begging for recall, but gradually a transformation occurred. Stripped of the distractions and accolades of city life, he was forced to turn inward. His poetry, once focused on witty and playful themes, deepened into a profound meditation on loss, memory, and the search for meaning. His external world had shrunk to almost nothing, but his internal world, his creative power, expanded to fill the void. In having less, he ironically found more depth, more authenticity, more of his true voice as an artist. Centuries later, the Italian poet Dante Alighieri would walk a similar path. Exiled from his beloved Florence for political reasons and threatened with death if he ever returned, he spent nearly 20 years wandering from city to city. He was a man without a home, often dependent on the generosity of patrons. Yet it was during this period of profound loss and rootlessness that he composed his masterpiece, the Divine Comedy. One could argue that the epic poem, a journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise, could only have been written by a man who had lost his earthly paradise. Exile gave him the perspective, the emotional raw material, and perhaps even the burning need to create a work of such immense scale and spiritual depth. His physical wandering mirrored an internal journey, and having been stripped of his civic identity and possessions, he was free to explore the vast landscapes of the soul. His contentment, his purpose, was no longer tied to a specific plot of land or a political title. It was forged in the fire of his own imagination and intellect. Now bring this stark clarity into your own life. We are not literally exiled, but we are constantly bombarded with messages telling us that our happiness is just one purchase away, one promotion away, one new follower away. We accumulate so much physical clutter, digital clutter, social obligations, that we can lose sight of what is actually essential. So here is a simple but powerful reflective practice drawn directly from this Stoic lesson. Take a moment and ask yourself, What are 3 things I believe I absolutely need to be happy? Maybe it's a certain income level, a particular relationship, a dream house, or a specific career achievement. Write them down now. Interrogate that list with the ruthless honesty of an exile. Is it truly the thing itself that I need, or is it the feeling I believe it will provide? For example, if you wrote down a bigger house, is it the square footage you need, or is it the feeling of security, of success, of space for your family to grow? The Stoic insight is that those feelings, security, success, connection, are not locked inside the house. They are cultivated internally. You can practice feeling successful by appreciating your current progress. You can cultivate security by building your resilience. You can create connection by being fully present with the people already in your life. By distinguishing the desired feeling from the external object, you begin to break the chain of dependency. You start to see that the power to generate those feelings has been within you all along, and that realization is the beginning of a contentment that no market crash, no change in circumstances, no external loss can ever destroy. What looks like an obstacle is often the very path to your strength. This is not a comforting platitude. It is a fundamental reorientation of perspective that the Stoics not only taught but lived. They developed a powerful mental alchemy, a way of taking the raw, painful material of a setback and transforming it into fuel for progress. This is the 4th profound lesson from exile, that every barrier, every limitation, and every form of resistance can be systematically reframed as a chance for growth, for creativity, and for discovering a strength you never knew you possessed. When the outside world says, "No, you cannot go that way," the Stoic exile learns to stop arguing with the wall and instead asks, "What new way can I create?" This shift turns you from a passive victim of circumstance into an active, creative agent in your own life. The limitation ceases to be a dead end and becomes a detour that might just lead you to a far more interesting destination. At the heart of this practice is a concept often summarized by the phrase, turning impediments into fuel. The Stoics viewed obstacles not as nuisances to be avoided, but as the essential raw material for practicing virtue. Courage cannot exist without danger. Patience cannot be cultivated without delay. Resilience is meaningless without adversity. Therefore, the obstacle is not an interruption of the path, it is the path. It provides the exact friction needed to develop the qualities you wish to embody. This is why exile, the ultimate external impediment, was so often the catalyst for profound inner development. Stripped of all the usual crutches and distractions, the individual is forced to rely solely on their own resources, sparking a level of innovation and self-reliance that a life of ease could never inspire. No one articulated this principle more succinctly than the emperor-philosopher Marcus Aurelius. In his private journal, now known as Meditations, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This simple, paradoxical statement is a master key for unlocking difficulty. He is saying that the obstacle itself provides the opportunity for action. A blocked road forces you to find a new route which might be more scenic. A financial setback forces you to budget creatively, which might lead to greater financial literacy. A criticism of your work forces you to re-evaluate and improve it. The obstacle isn't something to be endured until you can get back to your real life. Engaging with the obstacle mindfully is the real work of your life. It is the training ground where your character is forged. History is filled with exiles who embodied this principle, turning their banishment into a surprising creative advantage. Consider the story of the ancient Greek philosopher Diogenes the Cynic. Exiled from his hometown of Sinope, he arrived in Athens with nothing. Rather than seeing this as a catastrophe, he treated it as a liberating experiment. His lack of a home became an opportunity to prove that happiness required no possessions, famously living in a large ceramic jar. His exile forced a simplicity that became the very foundation of his philosophy, inspiring generations. Centuries later, the Italian political thinker Niccolò Machiavelli experienced a similar transformation. Forced into exile after a political upheaval in Florence, he was banished to a small country estate. Initially, he was miserable, writing letters about his boredom and despair, but he eventually channeled that restless energy into writing. His time away from the hustle of political life gave him the quiet and perspective to produce his masterworks, The Prince and the Discourses, works that would define political philosophy for centuries. His obstacle being removed from power became the very condition that allowed him to analyze power with such timeless clarity. This transformative approach is not confined to the ancient world. In the 20th century, Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and a profound Stoic thinker in his own right, demonstrated this principle in the most horrific circumstances imaginable. Imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, he was stripped of everything: his home, his possessions, his manuscripts, even his family. He observed that while the gods could control his physical environment, they could not control his mental freedom to choose his attitude. He wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that even in the midst of unimaginable suffering, a person can choose to find a purpose. For Frankl, the ultimate obstacle became the way to discover the deepest truth about human resilience, that our primary drive is not pleasure, but the discovery of meaning. His exile, his imprisonment, became the fuel for a psychological theory that has given solace and direction to millions. Now, bring this powerful reframing into your own life. You are undoubtedly facing some form of obstacle right now. It might not be exile or imprisonment. It might be a difficult project at work, a strained relationship, a financial pressure, or even a personal goal that feels out of reach. The Stoic invitation is to pause your frustration for a moment and conduct a simple thought experiment. Take a piece of paper and write down that obstacle at the top. Now, instead of listing all the reasons it's a problem, brainstorm answers to this question. How could this specific obstacle actually be used? What strength could it help you develop? What new path could it force you to discover? If your project is difficult, is it an opportunity to develop deeper expertise or more creative problem solving? If a relationship is strained, is it a chance to practice patience, clearer communication, or setting healthy boundaries? If you feel stuck in a routine, could that feeling be a signal to finally explore a new hobby or skill? The obstacle itself holds the clues. By engaging with it not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a teacher offering a lesson, you perform the ultimate act of alchemy. You stop fighting your circumstances and start using them, transforming the very thing that stands in your way into the path that moves you forward. How often do you find yourself instantly swept up in a wave of emotion, reacting to a situation before you've even had a chance to truly understand it? That immediate flare of anger in traffic, that sinking feeling of anxiety from a terse email, that defensive posture when criticized, these are all moments where we are not in control. We are being controlled by our initial, raw impressions. This is where the fifth lesson from exile offers a profound tool for reclaiming your inner power, the practice of detached observation. When you are cast out from your normal life, you are suddenly granted a strange and powerful perspective. You are no longer fully immersed in the drama of everyday society. You become a spectator, watching the play from the sidelines. The Stoics learn to cultivate this perspective intentionally, not as a cold, unfeeling withdrawal, but as a wise and strategic pause that creates space for a more thoughtful, more powerful response. It is the difference between being a character in a storm, tossed about by every wave, and being the lighthouse keeper, observing the storm's fury from a place of calm stability, understanding its patterns without being destroyed by them. This practice is deeply rooted in the core of Stoic psychology. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave, offered perhaps the most crucial piece of advice for mastering this skill. He taught that between any external event and our reaction, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. He said, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, 'Hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent.' Let me put you to the test." This is the essence of detached observation. It is that deliberate hold on a moment. It is the conscious decision to not immediately assent to an impression, to not automatically believe that a situation is as catastrophic or as personal as it first appears. You are not denying the reality of the event. You are simply refusing to be hijacked by your initial, often exaggerated, interpretation of it. You are becoming a scientist of your own mind, examining the data before drawing a conclusion. The Stoics had a powerful technique for achieving this called the view from above, or the cosmic perspective. This involves mentally pulling the camera back from your immediate problem, far above the earth, until your city, your street, and your specific concern appear as tiny, almost insignificant specks in the vast expanse of space and time. From this detached vantage point, does that rude comment from a colleague still feel like a world-ending event? Does that minor setback still seem insurmountable? This isn't meant to make your problems feel trivial or to encourage apathy. Its purpose is to provide desperately needed context. It shrinks the overwhelming emotion down to a manageable size, allowing you to see the situation with clarity rather than through a distorted lens of fear or anger. It reminds you that this, too, is just one moment in the long flow of your life, and that you have the capacity to navigate it with wisdom. We can see this principle in action with brilliant clarity in the lives of history's exiles. Consider the Roman statesman and philosopher Cicero. During a period of his own political exile, he was consumed by despair and wrote letters filled with anguish. Yet, in his more philosophical moments, he was able to adopt this detached view, writing about the folly of being overly invested in the shifting opinions of the mob and the temporary nature of political favor. This ability to oscillate between immersion and observation is a deeply human struggle. More recently, Nelson Mandela, during his 27 years of imprisonment, mastered this art. He observed his captors with a cool, anthropological detachment, studying their habits, their fears, and their weaknesses. He did not allow himself to be consumed by hatred. Instead, he used his detached observation to understand the very people who held him captive. This mental distance provided him with immense strategic clarity. It allowed him to maintain his dignity, to plan for a future beyond the walls, and ultimately, to negotiate with his oppressors from a position of unshakable inner strength, not raw emotion. His power came from his ability to see the entire chessboard, not just his own isolated piece. The invitation for you is to begin building this crucial muscle of pause. It doesn't require a dramatic life change. It can be practiced in the smallest moments of your day. The next time you feel that familiar surge of stress when your heart starts to race, your jaw clenches, or your thoughts begin to spiral, that is your signal. Instead of immediately reacting, see if you can take just one deep breath and name what is happening. Mentally say to yourself, "I am having the feeling of anger," or "I am noticing a thought that this is a disaster." This simple act of labeling creates instant distance. You are no longer the anger itself. You are the one observing the anger. You are not the thought. You are the awareness behind the thought. For the rest of today, choose one specific situation that typically triggers you. It could be a work deadline, a hectic household morning, or a difficult conversation. Your only job in that moment is to observe. Watch your own impulses arise without acting on them immediately. Notice the physical sensations, the stories your mind starts to tell, all from a slight distance. You don't have to change anything, just observe. In that quiet space of observation, you will find a new kind of power beginning to grow, the power to choose your response, rather than being a prisoner of your reactions. While the world may be loud and chaotic, your inner world can be a place of profound silence. This is not about escaping reality, but about building a sanctuary within it, a quiet center from which you can observe the storm without being swept away by it. The Stoics understood that the greatest battles are not fought on distant fields, but in the quiet space between our ears, and they developed powerful practices to fortify this inner citadel against the relentless noise of external life. For someone in exile, this skill was not a luxury, it was a matter of survival. Stripped of familiar surroundings and constant social validation, they were forced to confront the one thing we often spend our entire lives avoiding, the sound of our own thoughts. In that confrontation, they discovered a hidden reservoir of strength, a deep and abiding calm that no external event could ever disrupt. Seneca, writing from his exile on Corsica, explored this idea extensively in his letters. He advised his friend Lucilius to regularly retreat into himself, to find a peace that was not dependent on location or circumstance. He wrote, "You must retreat into yourself as often as you can. You will be recharged when you associate with people who are true to themselves and simple in their habits." For Seneca, this inner retreat was an active practice, a form of mental discipline. It wasn't about waiting for a quiet moment to arrive. It was about consciously creating that quiet moment amidst the chaos. He practiced what we might now call mindfulness, deliberately directing his attention away from the agitations of the outside world and toward the steady, unchanging principles of reason and virtue within. This daily practice of turning inward allowed him to maintain his equanimity even when his external life was in complete disarray, proving that tranquility is an inside job. Throughout history, we find countless exiles who turned their forced solitude into a furnace for forging incredible inner strength. Consider the Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky, who was sentenced to 4 years in a Siberian labor camp. The external conditions were brutal hard labor, frigid cold, and the constant company of criminals. Yet, in his memoir, The House of the Dead, he describes how this period of intense external confinement led to an explosive expansion of his inner life. Deprived of books, writing materials, and stimulating conversation, he was left with only his own mind. He spent hours in deep introspection, observing his own reactions, his fears, and his hopes with an almost clinical detachment. This intense period of inner silence and observation provided the raw emotional and psychological material for his later masterpieces like Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov. His exile did not break him. It forced him to cultivate the inner silence necessary to become one of the most profound psychological novelists in history. This practice is perhaps more relevant today than ever before. Our modern world is a state of perpetual exile from silence. We are constantly connected, constantly consuming information, constantly bombarded with notifications and demands on our attention. This external noise creates a corresponding internal noise, a restless, anxious hum that makes it difficult to hear our own thoughts, let alone find peace within them. We flee from silence because it feels uncomfortable, not realizing that within that discomfort lies the very clarity and calm we are searching for elsewhere. The Stoic lesson is that we must become exiles from this noise voluntarily. We must consciously choose to step away from the cacophony and practice being alone with ourselves, not as a punishment, but as a necessary training for the soul. The invitation here is simple but profound. Today, carve out just 5 minutes, find a quiet space, sit comfortably, and set a timer. Your only task is to sit in silence and observe your thoughts without judgment. You don't need to empty your mind or achieve some perfect state of Zen. You are simply the watchful guardian at the gate of your own consciousness. Notice the thoughts as they arise, worries about work, plans for dinner, a memory from yesterday. Don't chase them or try to push them away. Just acknowledge them and let them pass like clouds moving across the sky. You will likely find it difficult at first. The mind, accustomed to constant stimulation, will rebel. It will itch for you to pick up your phone or find a distraction. But in that act of gently refusing, in that conscious return to observation, you are performing a radical act of inner sovereignty. You are building your sanctuary, one quiet breath at a time, proving to yourself that no matter how loud the world gets, you always have access to a profound and powerful silence within. Fighting against reality is like trying to stop the waves with your bare hands. You'll only exhaust yourself and still end up soaked. This is the 7th and perhaps one of the most liberating lessons from exile, that our suffering is rarely about the circumstance itself, but about our frantic, exhausting resistance to it. We confuse acceptance with resignation, thinking that to accept a difficult truth is to wave a white flag and admit defeat. But Stoicism draws a crucial, life-changing distinction between the two. Resignation is passive. It says, "This is terrible and I can't do anything about it, so I give up." It's a state of helplessness. Acceptance, in the Stoic sense, is profoundly active. It says, "This is the current reality. I may not like it, I may not have chosen it, but fighting against the facts is a waste of my precious energy. Now, what can I do within this new reality?" Acceptance is the act of clearly seeing the playing field you're on, so you can stop raging about its boundaries and start playing the game effectively. It is the first, essential step toward reclaiming your agency. This entire philosophy is built upon the foundational stone laid by Epictetus in the very first line of his manual, the Enchiridion. He begins not with a complex theory, but with a simple, practical list. Some things are up to us, some are not. Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, these are within our power. Our property, our reputation, our health, our status, these are not. The profound freedom he offers is the freedom to stop pouring your energy into the second column and to focus it entirely on the first. When you are exiled, your property and your reputation in your homeland are clearly in the "not up to us" column. Wasting your days writing angry letters demanding their return, or sinking into a pit of despair because you lost them, is a fundamental misallocation of your inner resources. The person who accepts this fact is not weak. They are a realist who has just freed up a massive amount of mental and emotional capital to invest in the only things they can truly control: their character, their judgments, and their actions right where they are. History provides us with a stark contrast between those who understood this and those who did not. Consider the Roman poet Ovid, whom we mentioned earlier. For the first years of his exile on the Black Sea, his writings are a masterclass in resistance. He lamented his fate, complained about the barbaric locals, the terrible weather, and begged endlessly for a recall. His resistance to his reality became his entire focus, and it consumed him. While he still wrote, his energy was directed backward toward what was lost. Now contrast this with someone like the Tibetan Buddhist monk Palden Gyatso, who was imprisoned by Chinese authorities for 33 years. He faced torture and unimaginable hardship. Yet in his memoir, he describes a moment of profound shift when he stopped asking, "Why me?" and instead asked, "What now?" He accepted the reality of his imprisonment, not the justice of it, but the simple, brutal fact of it. This acceptance allowed him to turn his cell into a place of secret teaching and meditation, to find small ways to practice compassion toward his captors and to protect his inner dignity. His body was captive, but his spirit was free because he had stopped fighting an unwinnable war against his circumstances and had started winning the winnable war for his own mind. The practical application of this lesson is immense because we all face our own forms of internal exile every single day. You might be resisting a difficult health diagnosis, a job loss, the end of a relationship, or even just the fact that it's raining on the day you planned a picnic. The mechanism of suffering is the same. We create a story about how things should be, and we clash that story against the unmovable wall of how things are. The resulting friction is our pain. The Stoic move is to drop the story of should. This doesn't mean you have to like the rain. It just means you acknowledge without drama that the rain is falling. Now, with that energy you saved by not complaining, you can decide to move the picnic indoors, put on a raincoat and go for a walk, or simply enjoy the sound of the rain against the window. Acceptance empowers you to find the next right step, so here is a challenge for you. Bring to mind one specific thing you have been resisting. It might be a personality trait in a family member you're always trying to change, a financial limitation that frustrates you, or a mistake from your past that you can't stop ruminating on. Take a moment to truly feel the weight of that resistance, the mental arguments, the emotional exhaustion. Now, experiment with acceptance. Say to yourself, either out loud or in your mind, this is the situation. It is what it is. Feel the difference in your body when you stop pushing against it. This isn't about approving of the situation. It's about acknowledging its existence without judgment. From that place of calm acknowledgement, ask yourself the most important question. If I accept this as the current reality, what is one small, meaningful action I can take right now? You might be surprised to find that the answer has been waiting for you all along, hidden behind the noise of your resistance. What if the very walls you feel are caging you in are actually the ones showing you the way out? This is the powerful paradox at the heart of our 8th lesson from exile. We often see limitations as the enemy of purpose, the things that prevent us from achieving our dreams. But the Stoics flipped this entirely on its head. They proposed that external circumstances, no matter how difficult, are merely the raw material for virtue. Exile, in this light, isn't a sentence to irrelevance. It's a stark, unforgiving canvas upon which your true purpose can be painted with breathtaking clarity. When all the non-essentials are forcibly removed, the social obligations, the professional ladder, the endless pursuit of status and stuff, you are left standing face to face with the most fundamental question: what is actually worth doing with my time, with my mind, with my life? The distractions are gone. All that remains is the signal through the noise. Marcus Aurelius, a man who faced immense constraints not of exile but of immense imperial power and constant warfare, constantly reflected on this idea. He wrote in his Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But he also went deeper, suggesting that these very obstacles serve a divine purpose in revealing our duty and testing our character. He reminded himself to ask in any challenging situation, what is this obstacle requiring of me? What quality does it demand that I develop? A period of forced isolation might demand the cultivation of patience and self-reflection. A financial setback might demand creativity and frugality. The limitation itself acts as a kind of ruthless but effective life coach, stripping away the options that are no longer available so you can finally see the one path that is, the path of building inner strength and living in alignment with your core principles. Your purpose, then, is not found in spite of the limitation, but because of it. It is the specific virtue that your specific circumstance is calling you to practice. We find stunning historical proof of this principle in the lives of those who were literally cast out. Consider the case of Boethius, a Roman senator and philosopher in the 6th century. He enjoyed immense wealth, status, and influence, living a life of comfort and intellectual pursuit. Then he was accused of treason, imprisoned, and ultimately executed. It was in that cold prison cell, stripped of everything he thought defined him, that he wrote his masterpiece, The Consolation of Philosophy. Facing his own mortality and the utter ruin of his external life, his purpose became crystal clear: to reconcile the existence of misfortune in a world governed by a benevolent God, and to find a philosophy of comfort that could withstand any earthly suffering. His limitation, imprisonment, and impending death didn't hinder his work. It became the entire subject and catalyst for it. The book, written under the most severe constraints imaginable, became one of the most influential texts of the Middle Ages. A more modern example is the incredible story of Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who we've touched on before. His exile was the concentration camp, a place designed to strip humans of every shred of dignity, purpose, and identity. Frankl observed that those who survived were not necessarily the strongest or healthiest, but those who managed to find a meaning, a purpose to hold onto. He famously wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." His own purpose became to observe, to understand, and to later articulate this psychological insight. His profound constraint became the birthplace of logotherapy, a whole school of psychological thought built on the premise that the primary drive in humans is not pleasure, but the discovery of meaning. His life's work, which has helped millions, was directly forged in the furnace of his own extreme limitation. Now, bring this lens to your own life. You are likely not in a prison cell or a camp, but you do face constraints. Perhaps it's a demanding job that leaves little free time, a chronic health condition that limits your energy, financial pressures that restrict your options, or family responsibilities that anchor you to one place. The default reaction is often to see these as burdens holding you back from your real life. But the Stoic invitation is to ask a different, far more provocative question. How might this very constraint be directing me toward my purpose? That demanding job isn't just exhausting, it's rigorously training you in discipline, resilience, and perhaps even compassion for your colleagues. The health condition isn't just a curse, it's a relentless teacher of patience, listening to your body and appreciating the good days profoundly. The financial pressure isn't just stressful, it's a masterclass in creativity, distinguishing wants from needs and building security from the inside out. Your constraints are not random punishments, they are the specific, personalized curriculum for your soul's development. So take a moment to look at the largest limitation you feel in your life right now. Instead of resenting it, ask it, what are you here to teach me? What virtue are you forcing me to develop? The answer to that question might just be the clearest direction toward your purpose you have ever received. Exile teaches that gratitude isn't for when everything is perfect, it's for when almost nothing is. It's easy to feel thankful when life is going well, when the sun is shining and the path is clear. But the real power of gratitude reveals itself in the darkness, in those moments when it feels like you have lost almost everything. This is not about slapping a happy face on a terrible situation or denying the reality of pain. It is about making a conscious, courageous choice to focus on the few embers that still glow amidst the ashes, and by focusing on them, gently breathing them back into a flame that can warm you from within. This practice is a form of emotional alchemy, transforming the lead of deprivation into the gold of resilience. It is a deliberate rebellion against self-pity, a refusal to let your spirit be completely defined by what is missing. The Stoics had a specific and powerful mental exercise designed to cultivate this exact mindset, known as premeditatio malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. At first glance, it sounds pessimistic, spending time imagining things going wrong, losing what you have, or facing hardship, but its true purpose is the opposite. By vividly envisioning the loss of your health, your loved ones, your home, or your comfort, you accomplish something remarkable. You shatter the illusion of permanence that surrounds the good things in your life. You shake yourself out of taking them for granted. When you seriously contemplate what it would be like to lose your ability to walk, the simple act of taking a step becomes a minor miracle. When you imagine the passing of a family member, the sound of their laughter in the next room becomes a precious gift. This practice is not meant to create fear. It is meant to generate a profound and immediate appreciation for the present moment. It is gratitude forged in the fires of imagination, making you richer for what you have without needing to acquire a single new thing. Seneca, who experienced the comforts of wealth and the sting of exile, deeply understood this principle. He advised his friend Lucilius to use this tool not to dread the future, but to luxuriate in the present. He wrote, "We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." His insight is that by mentally rehearsing loss, we do two things. First, we build emotional resilience for if that loss ever actually occurs. But second, and more importantly for our daily lives, we enhance our enjoyment and gratitude for what we currently possess. The exile who has actually lost their home doesn't need to imagine its loss, they are living it. Their practice is to find within that stark new reality the things that loss could not take. The warmth of the sun on their face, the ability to think clearly, the memory of a friend's kindness, the taste of clean water. This is gratitude in its most potent and essential form. We see this heroic practice of gratitude in the most harrowing conditions imaginable. Prisoners of war and political detainees throughout history have provided stunning testimonials about how clinging to microscopic blessings became their lifeline. Admiral James Stockdale, a fighter pilot shot down over Vietnam and held as a prisoner for over 7 years, was a student of Stoic philosophy. He credited Epictetus with giving him the mental tools to survive torture and isolation. In his writings, he described how he and his fellow prisoners would focus intensely on the smallest of positives, a shared tap code message through a wall, a scrap of conversation during a rare moment of contact, the fleeting warmth of a sunbeam through a barred window. These were not trivialities, they were essential nutrients for the soul. In the utter deprivation of the Hanoi Hilton, the practice of gratitude was not a feel-good exercise. It was a vital survival strategy, a way to remind themselves that not everything had been taken, that their humanity and their connection to others could still flourish in the tiniest of spaces. This practice is available to you right now, no matter your circumstances. You may be facing your own form of deprivation. It could be a lack of time, a lack of energy, a lack of connection, or a lack of peace. The invitation is to consciously shift your focus from the vastness of what is missing to the reality of what remains. So here is a simple, profound exercise drawn directly from this Stoic lesson. Pause for a moment, take a breath, and make a list, either in your mind or on a piece of paper, of 3 things you still have. They must be small and specific. Not my family, but the way my daughter's hand feels in mine. Not my health, but the feeling of cool water quenching my thirst. Not my job, but the satisfaction of solving one small problem today. Hold each one in your mind, not as an abstract concept, but as a sensory experience. Sit with the gratitude for that one specific thing for just 15 seconds. Do not rush. In doing this, you are not ignoring your problems. You are simply building a foundation of strength from which to face them. You are collecting evidence that your life, even on a difficult day, still contains goodness. And that evidence becomes the unshakable ground for your resilience. Resilience is not a shield you're born with, its armor you forge through repeated blows. This is a crucial distinction that changes everything. We often look at people who seem unshakable in the face of adversity and assume they must possess some special, innate quality, some unbreakable spirit that the rest of us simply lack. But Stoicism argues that this is a fundamental misunderstanding of human strength. Resilience is not a genetic gift or a lucky accident. It is a skill, a capacity that is developed through consistent, deliberate practice, much like a muscle that grows stronger only when it is consistently and progressively challenged. The exiles we've been learning from did not wake up on their first day of banishment filled with unwavering fortitude. They built it brick by mental brick through the daily, often mundane, practice of facing their new reality with courage and clarity. Their power was not a pre-existing condition. It was the direct result of their repeated efforts. This view transforms resilience from a mysterious trait into a practical, achievable goal. The Stoics, particularly teachers like Musonius Rufus, framed this in a very direct way. He famously said, "Since it is the case that no one can have the expertise in any art without learning it by repeated acts, is it not even more true that a human cannot be good without practice?" He compared the training for hardship to the training of an athlete or a musician. A pianist does not sit down and flawlessly perform a concerto on the first try. They practice scales, they repeat difficult passages hundreds of times, they build muscle memory and mental focus through relentless repetition. In the same way, we cannot expect to perform with grace and strength during a major life crisis if we have not been doing our daily reps with smaller difficulties. The goal of Stoic practice is to make virtuous action courage, justice, temperance, wisdom so habitual that it becomes your default response, even under immense pressure. You are not waiting for the storm to hit to learn how to sail. You are practicing in all weathers so that when the hurricane arrives, you know exactly what to do. This philosophy of incremental training was the daily bread for history's exiles. Each day in their isolated or confined state presented a new set of challenges: loneliness, boredom, fear, uncertainty, physical discomfort. They could have succumbed to any one of these, and many did. But those who thrived approached each day not as another sentence to be endured, but as another training session. The hunger was practice in temperance, the silence was practice in introspection, the injustice was practice in forgiveness, the uncertainty was practice in focusing on the present moment. By reframing each difficulty as a rep in their mental and emotional workout, they transformed their entire exile from a passive punishment into an active gymnasium for the soul. They were not just waiting for their circumstances to change, they were using their circumstances to change themselves, becoming a little stronger, a little wiser with each passing day. Their resilience was the cumulative result of thousands of small choices to practice virtue in the face of adversity. The beautiful and empowering truth is that you do not need to be literally exiled to begin this training. Your daily life is already filled with the perfect raw material for building resilience. That moment of frustration when you're stuck in traffic is not just wasted time, it is an opportunity to practice patience. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding is not just an anxiety trigger, it is a chance to practice courage and clear communication. That project that feels overwhelming is not just a source of stress, it is a gym for developing focus and perseverance. The goal is to stop seeing these everyday irritations and challenges as nuisances to be eliminated, and to start seeing them as the essential weights and resistance bands for your resilience workout. They are the perfect size and weight for you to handle right now, designed by life itself to help you grow stronger precisely where you need it most. So the practical application of this lesson is to move from theory to action, from admiration to practice. Take a moment to identify one specific area in your life where you would like to feel more resilient. Maybe it's dealing with criticism without becoming defensive, handling work stress without bringing it home, or maintaining your composure when your plans fall apart. Once you've identified that area, design one tiny, repeatable practice for yourself. This is crucial. It must be small and sustainable. If you want to be less reactive to stress, your practice could be taking 3 deep breaths before responding to any frustrating email. If you want to build endurance for discomfort, it could be taking a 1-minute cold shower at the end of your normal shower. If you want to practice focus, it could be working for 25 minutes without checking your phone. The specific action matters less than the consistency of the repetition. Commit to doing this one small thing every single day for the next week. Do not worry about the grand result, just focus on completing the rep. In doing so, you are actively participating in your own transformation. You are no longer a passive recipient of whatever life throws at you. You are the blacksmith at the forge, patiently and deliberately hammering your inner armor into something stronger and more resilient with every single blow. When you're stripped of everything optional, you're left with everything essential. This is the profound clarity that exile imposes. A brutal but effective editor that cuts away the trivial, the superficial, and the distracting, leaving behind only what truly matters. In our normal lives, we accumulate so much of physical possessions, social obligations, digital notifications, and mental clutter. We mistake this accumulation for living a full life, when in reality, it often just creates a thick fog that obscures our view of our own values, our relationships, and our inner selves. Exile blows this fog away. Suddenly, you can't access 90% of what filled your days. You are left in a stark, quiet room with only a few items, a few memories, and your own character. In that silence, a remarkable thing happens. You begin to see with startling clarity what was always there, buried under the noise. This isn't about romanticizing poverty or hardship. It's about recognizing that constantly adding more to our lives often subtracts from our ability to see what we already have. The Stoics were fierce advocates for this kind of intentional simplicity. They saw the relentless pursuit of possessions and status not as a path to happiness, but as a form of self-imposed slavery. The more you own, the more your things own you. They demand your time, your energy, your worry. Seneca, in his letters, tackled this idea with characteristic bluntness. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." He observed that wealth does not create peace of mind. In fact, it often does the opposite. Every new possession comes with a hidden cost: the anxiety of losing it, the effort of maintaining it, the desire for the next, better version. He advised actively reducing one's belongings, not to the point of misery, but to the point of freedom. By consciously living with less, you are not depriving yourself. You are liberating yourself from the endless cycle of desire and maintenance. You are making a conscious choice to invest your limited life energy into things that cannot be taken away: your virtue, your wisdom, your connections with others, rather than into objects that are here today and gone tomorrow. This philosophy of essentialism stands in stark contrast to the modern world of overwhelming choice. We live in an age of infinite options. We can choose from hundreds of streaming services, thousands of products on a single website, and millions of pieces of content at our fingertips. This abundance was supposed to make us happier, but psychologists have identified a phenomenon known as the paradox of choice. Too many options can lead to anxiety, decision fatigue, and a lingering dissatisfaction that perhaps a different choice would have been better. We are constantly curating our lives, adding more filters, more subscriptions, more gadgets, in a desperate attempt to optimize our experience, only to find ourselves more overwhelmed and less present than ever before. Our exile is not a physical banishment to a remote island. It is a digital and mental banishment to a sea of endless possibility, where we are so busy managing our options that we forget to actually live our lives. Now consider the historical exiles who were forced into this clarity. They had no choice. Their world shrank dramatically. The Roman philosopher Cicero, during his exile, found himself Chinese letter from the political intrigue and social whirl of Rome. While he struggled with despair, his letters also reveal moments of profound introspection and a renewed focus on his philosophical studies and his family. His external world had collapsed, forcing him to turn inward and upward to what he truly valued. A more modern example is the author Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was imprisoned in the Soviet Gulag system. In those brutal labor camps, all the trappings of a normal life were obliterated. Yet, in his book The Gulag Archipelago, he describes how this extreme reduction revealed the core of human dignity. The prisoners who survived were not the strongest, but those who clung to tiny acts of kindness, to shared fragments of poetry, to their inner moral code. They had been stripped of everything the world tells us is important, and in that emptiness they discovered what is actually essential: integrity, compassion, and the unbreakable human spirit. Their existence was simplified to the point of agony, but it was also clarified to the point of profound truth. This lesson invites you to conduct a thought experiment, to voluntarily step into the shoes of an exile without having to suffer the actual banishment. So imagine this: due to some unforeseen circumstance, you must leave your home immediately and permanently. You can only take what you can carry in one bag. Not a suitcase, but a single backpack or duffel bag. You have 10 minutes to pack. What do you take? Your mind might first jump to practical items: a passport, money, a phone charger. But then, as the clock ticks, you are forced to make quicker, more instinctive choices. That framed photo of your family, the worn journal filled with your thoughts. A simple token given to you by a loved one, perhaps a single book that has deeply shaped your thinking. Notice what you don't grab. You almost certainly leave behind the trendy clothes, the expensive electronics, the decorative knickknacks, the souvenirs from vacations. In this moment of simulated crisis, your values become incredibly clear. The things that provide comfort, connection, and identity rise to the top. The things that are merely for show or temporary entertainment fall away. This exercise is not about literally preparing a go bag. It's about using the constraint to reveal what you truly cherish. It forces you to distinguish between what is truly essential to your sense of self and what is merely clutter that fills your space and your time. The clarity you find in that mental exercise is a powerful compass. It can guide you to start simplifying your actual life right now, to clear away the non-essentials so you have more room, more energy, and more attention for the things you would put in that bag. The quickest way to inner power is knowing what is yours to control and what isn't. This is the razor-sharp wisdom that cuts through the clutter of anxiety and frees you to focus your energy where it actually makes a difference. We spend so much of our lives desperately trying to manage things that were never ours to manage in the first place: what other people think of us, the outcome of a risky venture, the weather on the day of our outdoor event, the past mistakes we can never undo. This frantic effort to control the uncontrollable is like trying to hold back the ocean with your bare hands. It's exhausting, futile, and ultimately leaves you feeling powerless and defeated. The Stoics, especially those who experienced the ultimate loss of exile, realized that the secret to tranquility wasn't in expanding their control over the world, but in perfecting their understanding of its precise boundaries. They drew a bright, unwavering line between the inner kingdom of the self, which is entirely theirs to command, and the vast, chaotic external world, which operates by its own rules. The moment you internalize this distinction, a massive weight lifts from your shoulders. You stop trying to command the wind and instead learn to adjust your sails. To deepen this crucial dichotomy of control, the Stoic teacher Epictetus offered a beautifully simple yet profound analogy. He asked us to imagine ourselves as the innkeeper of a bustling tavern, not the owner of the building itself. As guests, our possessions, our reputations, our social status, even our physical bodies arrive and depart. Our job is not to cling to them desperately or weep when they leave. Our duty is to welcome them politely while they are here, care for them to the best of our ability, and then let them go without drama when it is time for them to move on. We are temporary keepers, not permanent owners, the building itself representing the core of our being, our character, our faculty of choice, is on loan from the universe. We are its stewards, not its masters. This shift in perspective is revolutionary. It transforms attachment into stewardship. You can appreciate your comfortable home without defining yourself by it. You can enjoy a good reputation without becoming addicted to it. You can care for your body without believing your worth is tied to its appearance or health. When you see everything external as a guest passing through your inn, you can engage with life fully and passionately, but without the desperate, white-knuckled grip that guarantees future suffering when change inevitably comes. History provides powerful testimony to the liberation this wisdom can bring. Consider the countless political dissidents and intellectuals who are torn from their homelands. Those who define themselves by their national identity, their prestigious titles, or their property suffered a psychological death long before any physical one. Their sense of self was so entangled with these external markers that losing them felt like annihilation. But then there were those who had internalized the Stoic truth. They understood that their homeland, while beloved, was not truly theirs. It was a circumstance of their birth. Their status was not theirs. It was a gift or a verdict from others. Their property was not theirs. It was merely in their temporary possession. By releasing their claim of ownership over these things, they could lose them without losing themselves. This is not detachment in the sense of not caring. It is detachment in the sense of not being defined by what you care about. An exiled writer who understood this could continue writing, even if on scraps of paper in a prison cell, because their true identity was not a respected author in their city, but a person who writes. Their power came from within, and thus could not be taken away by any external decree. To make this philosophy practical and personal, here is a reflective exercise you can do right now. Take a piece of paper and draw a line down the center. On the left side, write, "What I believe I own." Start listing everything that comes to mind: your car, your job title, your relationship, your social media following, your athletic ability, your good health. Be brutally honest. Now, on the right side, create two columns: within my control and outside my control. Go through each item on your left and place it in the appropriate column on the right. Your car, outside your control, it can break down, be stolen, or crash. Your job title, outside your control, your company can restructure, your boss can change their mind. Your reputation, almost entirely outside your control, it lives in the minds of others. Now, look at the "within my control" column. What remains? Your effort to maintain the car. Your choice to perform your job with integrity. Your decision to act in ways that are honorable, regardless of whether others see it. Your attitude toward your health. Your character, your values, your judgments, your choices. This list is short, but it contains everything you will ever need. This is your true estate. This is the only thing you ever really owned in the first place. By regularly conducting this audit of ownership, you train your mind to invest its energy in the inner fortress that cannot be breached, rather than in the external world that is constantly changing hands. In a world that shouts, strength often whispers. We are conditioned to believe that power must be loud, that influence requires a grand gesture, and that the only valid response to adversity is to fight back with visible, vocal force. But the 13th lesson from exile reveals a profound and counterintuitive truth, that there is an immense, often superior power in patient, dignified endurance. This is not the passive resignation of someone who has given up, but the active, courageous persistence of someone who understands that some battles are won not by charging the gates, but by outlasting the siege. It is the quiet strength of the deep-rooted tree that bends in the hurricane but does not break, knowing that the storm will eventually pass and it will still be standing. The Stoics had a specific word for this virtue, hypomone. This translates not to mere patience, but to steadfast endurance, to staying power under pressure. It is the conscious, willful decision to bear what is necessary without complaint, without fanfare, and without losing your core sense of purpose. Marcus Aurelius, who faced endless political scheming, military defeats, and personal loss, constantly reminded himself of this inner fortitude. He wrote in his Meditations, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet and withstand sudden and unexpected attacks." He wasn't advising a frantic struggle, but a grounded, resilient posture, the posture of the wrestler who knows how to absorb impact, conserve energy, and wait for the right moment to move. For him, this quiet perseverance amid the noise of adversity was the ultimate expression of rational strength, a way to remain aligned with nature and virtue, even when the world seemed determined to pull him off course. We find the most powerful examples of this silent endurance in the lives of those who faced exile not for years but for decades. Consider the incredible story of Nelson Mandela. Sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964, he spent 27 years in a small cell on Robben Island. The natural human reaction would have been rage, bitterness, or a despair that consumed him. Yet Mandela chose a different path. He endured the brutal routine, the isolation, the meaningless labor, but his endurance was not passive waiting. It was an active, internal campaign. He maintained his dignity through strict personal discipline. He continued his education and that of his fellow prisoners, and he engaged in quiet, secret negotiations that would eventually pave the way for his release and the dismantling of apartheid. His power grew not from a loud protest in those moments, but from the immense, accumulated weight of his unwavering endurance. He outlasted his oppressors not by defeating them in a dramatic battle, but by embodying a strength they could not comprehend and therefore could not break. Similarly, the Tibetan people, under decades of occupation and cultural suppression, have demonstrated a breathtaking collective form of hypomone. Theirs is not a story of loud, continuous revolution, but of a profound, silent endurance of spirit. They have maintained their language, their customs, and their Buddhist faith through quiet, daily acts of persistence, teaching children in secret, preserving sacred texts, and holding fast to a cultural identity against immense pressure to assimilate. This is not surrender. It is a deep spiritual resilience that understands some forms of power cannot be seized through force, but must be cultivated and protected through an unbreakable will to persist. Their strength whispers across generations, a testament to the fact that the most enduring victories are often won in the quiet corners of daily life, through the simple, courageous act of refusing to disappear. Now bring this concept out of the history books and into your own life. You are likely not facing a prison cell or political oppression, but you do encounter situations that provoke an immediate, reactive impulse. A frustrating delay, a provoking comment from a colleague, a period of seemingly interminable waiting for a goal to be realized. The modern instinct is to react, to fire off an angry email, to offer a cutting retort, to constantly check for updates, to vent our frustration loudly. But what if, in that specific moment, the most powerful thing you could do is nothing? Not a passive, defeated nothing, but a strategic, conscious choice to endure the discomfort without reaction. To simply let the provocation hang in the air, unanswered. To sit with the anxiety of waiting without trying to desperately resolve it. This silent endurance is not weakness. It is a display of supreme self-control. It communicates that you are not so easily thrown off your center, that your peace is not dependent on immediate resolution, and that you possess a deeper well of strength than your circumstances might suggest. So, reflect on your current challenges. Is there one situation where your instinct is to shout, but your wisdom might advise a whisper? Where patience and a dignified, steady persistence might ultimately prove far more powerful than any immediate reaction you could muster? What if you no longer needed anyone's permission to be at peace? What if your sense of worth, your confidence, your very right to exist contentedly did not hinge on a single word of praise, a like, a promotion, or a nod of approval from anyone else? This is the profound and liberating territory of the 14th lesson from exile. When you are cast out, the court of public opinion is suddenly adjourned. The people whose approval you once craved are no longer there to give it. The titles and accolades that signaled your value to the world are stripped away. You are left standing alone, and in that stark silence you are faced with a critical choice: to wither in the absence of external validation, or to finally become the source of it yourself. Exile forces this reckoning. It reveals the terrible fragility of a self that is built on the applause of others, and it offers the only true solution: to build a self that is rooted in unshakable inner conviction. The Stoics were architects of this internal foundation. They understood that seeking worth from outside yourself is like trying to fill a leaky bucket from a well that may or may not grant you water. It's a strategy destined for anxiety and disappointment. Instead, they cultivated a rigorous practice of self-awareness, developing their own inner metrics for a life well lived. Their measure of success was not wealth, status, or fame, but virtue, their own integrity, courage, justice, and wisdom. They conducted a daily audit of their own actions, asking not, "What did others think of me?" but, "Did I act according to my principles? Did I use reason over emotion? Did I contribute something of value, regardless of who saw it?" This internal scorecard made them immune to the fickle winds of popular opinion. Praise could not inflate them because they knew their own shortcomings. Blame could not crush them because they trusted their own judgment more than the judgment of those who did not share their values. Their validation became a closed loop, a system of self-assessment that was reliable, consistent, and entirely within their control. Epictetus, who knew the life of a slave and the scorn often attached to it, gave perhaps the most direct advice on this matter. He told his students, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone. This is more than just witty self-deprecation. It's a masterclass in disarming external judgment. By immediately agreeing with and even expanding upon the criticism, you completely drain it of its power to hurt you. You demonstrate that your self-worth is not up for debate because you are already more aware of your flaws than your critic could ever be. Your value is not determined by their opinion, but by your own ongoing work to improve. Epictetus is essentially saying that the opinions of those who don't share your commitment to virtue are as relevant as a fashion critique from a fish. They are operating in a completely different element, and their judgment is based on metrics that have nothing to do with your purpose. We see this fierce independence embodied in the lives of creators and thinkers who worked in exile, often without any hope of contemporary recognition. The philosopher Baruch Spinoza, excommunicated from his Jewish community in Amsterdam for his heretical views, was utterly alone. He could have recanted to regain the validation of his community. Instead, he chose to grind lenses for a living and continue his writing, developing ideas about God and nature that would later make him one of the most important philosophers of the rationalist tradition. He sought no one's approval, only clarity for himself. Centuries later, the painter Vincent van Gogh sold perhaps 1 or 2 paintings in his entire lifetime. The artistic establishment of his day provided him with no validation whatsoever, only rejection. Yet he painted nearly 900 works. His drive came from a deep, internal necessity to express what he saw and felt, not from a desire for external acclaim. His validation had to come from within, from his own conviction that he was capturing a truth, even if no one else could see it yet. Their profound legacies were built not on the shifting sands of public opinion, but on the bedrock of their own unwavering inner certainty. This lesson invites you to become a quiet scientist of your own social habits. For the next 24 hours, your mission is simply to notice. Pay close attention to the moments where you subtly, or not so subtly, seek that hit of external validation. It might be the way you phrase an email to make yourself sound more important, the quick glance at your phone after posting a picture to see how many likes it has, the way you tailor a story in conversation to win someone's approval, or the disappointment you feel when an accomplishment goes unacknowledged. Don't judge yourself for this. It's a deeply human conditioning. Just observe it. Then, in one of those moments, experiment. Choose not to fish for the compliment. Refrain from mentioning the achievement. Post something and then put your phone away for an hour. And in that space, instead of looking outward for the pat on the back, turn inward and give it to yourself. Mentally acknowledge your own effort. Recognize your own good intention. Validate your own existence, not for what you produced, but simply for who you are in that moment. It will feel strange at first, like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. But with each repetition, you are strengthening a new neural pathway, one that leads away from the anxiety of other people's opinions and toward the unshakable peace of your own self-regard. They can exile your body, but never your mind unless you let them. This is the ultimate declaration of independence that exile forces upon a person, and it forms the heart of the 15th Stoic lesson. Physical circumstances, the walls of a prison, the boundaries of an island, the rules of a captor can control where you go, what you do, and what you possess. But they have absolutely no jurisdiction over your thoughts, your judgments, your imagination, or your perspective. This is the inviolable territory of the inner citadel, a mental fortress that remains under your sole command no matter what is happening outside. The Stoics didn't just believe this, they trained for it. They practiced the art of mental freedom so that if the day ever came when their physical freedom was taken, they would already be masters of the only realm that truly matters. This isn't a metaphor, it is a practical skill, a psychological discipline that turns the mind into an unbreachable sanctuary of liberty. This concept of the inner citadel is perhaps the most empowering idea in the entire Stoic toolkit. Imagine your mind as a fortified castle. Outside the walls, the chaos of the world rages, storms of misfortune, invading armies of criticism, the sieges of difficult circumstances. These external events can rage and thunder all they want, but they cannot force open the gates without the permission of the guardian. That's you. You hold the keys. You decide what to let in and what to keep out. A harsh criticism is just sound waves in the air until you grant it entry and assent to its meaning. A financial setback is just numbers on a page until you interpret it as a catastrophe. The Stoic practice is to become the vigilant, discerning guardian of that gate, to understand that an impression or an external event has no power until you choose to give it power by believing it to be true and important. Your inner citadel is stocked with all the provisions you need for happiness: your reason, your virtue, your capacity for choice, and your ability to reframe any situation. No external force can plunder these stores. They can only be surrendered from within. This philosophy was lived and written about with stunning clarity by Anicius Manlius Severinus Boethius, a Roman senator and philosopher in the 6th century. While imprisoned on false charges, awaiting his execution, he wrote the Consolation of Philosophy, one of the most influential books of the Middle Ages. In it, he gives voice to this very Stoic idea, writing, "Nothing is miserable unless you think it so. Consider the breathtaking context of that statement." Here is a man who has lost his freedom, his reputation, his wealth, and knows he will soon lose his life. By any objective measure, his situation is the definition of misery. Yet he argues that misery is not a condition of circumstance, but a condition of thought. His body is in chains, but his mind is so free that it can roam through the highest concepts of philosophy, justice, and fate. He consoles himself not by hoping for a reprieve, but by exercising his reason to prove that his virtue and his inner state remain untouched by the tyranny outside his cell. His work is a monumental testament to the fact that the most profound freedom is an internal achievement. History is filled with such powerful examples of this mental liberty flourishing in the most confined physical spaces. The Spanish writer Miguel de Cervantes conceived much of Don Quixote, a masterpiece about the power of imagination over reality, while languishing in a debtor's prison. The Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky's time in a Siberian prison camp provided the raw, psychological depth that would later infuse novels like Crime and Punishment, where he explored the darkest and brightest corners of the human mind. Even in the 20th century, we find figures like the Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who, as a prisoner of war during World War II, became fascinated by how some individuals could remain focused and composed amidst chaos, a line of inquiry that led him to later develop the groundbreaking concept of flow. These individuals were physically confined, but their minds were on journeys of incredible scope and freedom. They used their constraints not as a cage for their creativity, but as a focusing lens for it. Their external exile became the very condition that allowed their inner world to expand to its fullest potential. The practice for you is to begin exercising this muscle of mental freedom in your own daily life. You may not be in a literal prison, but you likely have situations that feel confining: a tedious commute, a repetitive task, a stressful environment. Your reflective prompt is to choose one of these situations this week and perform a deliberate act of mental escape. This doesn't mean ignoring your responsibilities or zoning out. It means consciously shifting your perspective to reclaim your inner liberty. If you're stuck in traffic, instead of fuming at the delay, use the time to listen to an inspiring audiobook or to practice observing your thoughts without judgment. If you're doing a mundane chore, turn it into a meditation on the rhythm of the activity itself. If you feel limited by a certain rule or structure, brainstorm how it could actually be fostering creativity within those boundaries. The goal is to prove to yourself that your environment does not have to dictate your mental state. You always have the final say over the climate within your own mind. By practicing this small shift, you are strengthening the walls of your own inner citadel, ensuring that no matter what life brings, your mind remains a place of unwavering freedom and peace. Isolation is not always emptiness, it can be fullness in a different form. We often conflate being alone with being lonely, viewing solitude as a void that needs to be filled with noise and company. But the Stoics and the exiles who lived their philosophy discovered a profound secret. When you stop trying to escape your own company, you don't find emptiness, you discover an entire universe within. This forced retreat from the crowd becomes an unparalleled opportunity for deep self-dialogue, for study, and for forging a sense of kinship with all of humanity that is far more substantial than the superficial connections of everyday social life. It is in the quiet that we can finally hear the sound of our own thoughts, and in doing so, begin to understand the thoughts of everyone else. Seneca explored this idea with beautiful clarity in his letters, arguing that solitude is not a withdrawal from the world but a deeper engagement with it. He wrote, "When you are alone, you are least alone. You can converse with the wisest minds across centuries, you can examine your own character, and you can prepare yourself to re-enter society with greater wisdom and compassion." For Seneca, being alone was the essential precondition for truly meeting yourself. In the silence, without the constant performance of social roles and the distraction of others' opinions, you are confronted with who you really are, your fears, your desires, your virtues, and your flaws. This meeting is not always comfortable, but it is always fruitful. It is the raw material for all growth. And in getting to know yourself honestly, you inadvertently build a bridge of empathy to all other human beings. You recognize that the same fundamental struggles for meaning, for connection, for peace, are playing out in every heart. Your isolation becomes the very thing that connects you to the universal human experience. This transformative use of solitude is vividly illustrated by the exiles who turned their isolation into a conduit for connection rather than a barrier. The Roman statesman Cicero, during his periods of political exile, produced some of his most profound philosophical works. Separated from the Senate and the Forum, he engaged in deep correspondence and writing, connecting not just with his contemporaries but with the great thinkers of the past and future. His solitude forced a depth of thought that his busy public life never allowed. Centuries later, the French philosopher Michel de Montaigne, who retreated from public life to his country estate, used his solitude to invent the modern essay, a form of writing that is essentially a conversation with oneself, and through that self with the reader. He explored his own idiosyncrasies and thoughts with such honesty that readers for hundreds of years have found their own experiences reflected in his words. His isolation became the foundation for a deep and enduring connection with millions. Perhaps the most powerful example is the tradition of writing from prison cells. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Letter from a Birmingham Jail is a masterpiece born of forced isolation. Physically cut off from the movement, he used his solitude to articulate a defense of nonviolent protest that was so clear, so reasoned, and so deeply connected to universal principles of justice that it became a rallying cry for an entire nation. His isolation provided the quiet necessary to synthesize his thoughts and connect his specific struggle to the broader human yearning for freedom. He was alone in a cell, but his words forged a connection stronger than any prison wall. These individuals did not see their solitude as a sentence to irrelevance. They saw it as a studio for crafting something that would resonate far beyond their own limited circumstances. The modern world, with its constant connectivity, offers us the exact opposite of this stoic solitude. We are rarely ever truly alone. Our pockets buzz with notifications, our screens are filled with faces, and our attention is perpetually fractured. This hyperconnection often leads to a profound sense of existential loneliness, the feeling that despite being constantly in touch, we are not truly known or understood. We have exchanged the deep, sometimes difficult, connection with ourselves for an endless stream of shallow contact with others. The Stoic lesson here is that we must become exiles from this noise voluntarily. We must carve out islands of intentional solitude amidst the sea of distraction, not as a punishment, but as a necessary pilgrimage back to ourselves. So here is an invitation, a direct challenge from the Stoics and the exiles who mastered this art. Sometime in the next 7 days, schedule a single hour of intentional solitude. Go for a long walk without your phone or any headphones. Sit in a quiet room with just a journal. Do a mundane task like washing dishes or gardening in complete silence. Your only job is to be present with your own thoughts. At first, it will feel strange. Your mind will itch for distraction, replaying conversations or creating to-do lists. But if you persist, gently guiding your attention back to the present moment, you might notice something shift. You might find yourself reconnecting with a memory you had forgotten, gaining sudden clarity on a problem that seemed unsolvable, or simply feeling a deep sense of kinship with the world around you, the warmth of the sun, the sound of the wind, the simple miracle of being alive. This is not loneliness. This is the profound connection that can only be found when you stop looking for it outside and start discovering the infinite landscape within. Strength isn't found in the crisis, it's built in the quiet moments before. We often admire someone who remains calm and capable under immense pressure, imagining they must possess some rare, unshakable composure that the rest of us lack. But the Stoics would argue that this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how inner strength actually works. That composure is not a magical trait. It is the direct result of consistent, daily preparation. It is the product of countless unseen moments where that person deliberately fortified their mind against potential turmoil, much like a sailor who maintains their ship in calm waters so it can weather any storm. For the exile, this daily discipline was not a luxury or an abstract idea. It was a non-negotiable survival strategy, stripped of external structure and facing constant uncertainty. Their only anchor was the routine they imposed upon themselves, a self-made structure that preserved their sanity and their power when the world outside offered none. The Stoics developed two powerful, interlinked practices to accomplish this daily fortification: morning meditation and evening review. Marcus Aurelius, despite the colossal weight of leading the Roman Empire, began each day with a specific mental ritual. He didn't just wake up and check his scrolls, he prepared his mind. In his personal journal, he would lay out his expectations for the day, reminding himself of the nature of the people he would likely encounter: the annoying, the ungrateful, the arrogant. He did this not to cultivate cynicism, but to arm himself with realistic expectations. By anticipating friction and difficulty, he was never caught off guard by it. He would then reaffirm his own core principles, vowing to meet any provocation not with anger but with virtue, to meet chaos with calm, and to focus his energy only on what was within his sphere of influence. This morning meditation was like a mental inoculation. By exposing himself to a small, controlled dose of potential adversity in his mind, he built up the antibodies to handle the real thing when it arrived. Complementing this morning preparation was Seneca's practice of the evening examination. At the end of each day, he would retreat into quiet reflection and pose a series of probing questions to himself. What wrong did I correct today? What fault did I commit? What duty did I neglect? This was not an exercise in self-flagellation. It was a rigorous, loving audit of his own character. He would review his actions with the gentle but firm eye of a coach reviewing game tape, looking for areas of improvement, celebrating small victories of self-control, and identifying moments where he had been swept away by passion rather than guided by reason. This daily review closed the loop. The morning set the intention. The evening measured the alignment between that intention and his actual conduct. Together, these two practices created a continuous feedback loop for moral and mental development, ensuring that every day, no matter how chaotic, became a deliberate step toward greater inner strength and self-mastery. We see this principle of disciplined routine play out with incredible clarity in the lives of history's exiles. Consider the Polish composer Frédéric Chopin during his exile from his homeland. Amidst the political turmoil and personal loneliness of his life in Paris, he adhered to an almost monastic daily routine. His days were meticulously structured around hours of practice, composition, and teaching. This self-imposed order was not a constraint. It was the very framework that allowed his creative genius to flourish. It provided a predictable harbor of calm in the unpredictable sea of exile, protecting his fragile health and his artistic focus from the chaos outside his door. Similarly, Nelson Mandela, during his decades of imprisonment, famously maintained a strict physical and mental routine. He would exercise relentlessly in his cell, using calisthenics to maintain not just his body but his discipline. He studied, he debated with fellow prisoners, and he led. His routine was an act of defiance, a way to assert control over his own existence and to demonstrate to his captors that while they could lock up his body, they could not command his spirit. His inner power was not a sudden emergence upon his release. It was the cumulative result of thousands of disciplined mornings and evenings spent in preparation within his cell. The profound takeaway is that you do not need a crisis to start building this resilience. In fact, the best time to build it is right now, in the ordinary, quiet moments of your life. The goal is to develop these mental muscles so that when a true challenge arrives, a personal loss, a professional setback, a period of great uncertainty, your disciplined response is already second nature. You have already rehearsed it, your mind knows the drill, so the practical invitation here is to not admire this idea from a distance, but to embody it through a tiny, consistent action. This week, create one simple 5-minute ritual for yourself. It could be a morning practice, spending 5 minutes with your coffee, writing down one intention for how you want to show up today, and mentally rehearsing a potential challenge you might face. Or it could be an evening practice, lying in bed for 5 minutes and reviewing your day without judgment, asking yourself what you learned and how you grew. The specific form is less important than the consistency. This small daily investment is how you move the philosophy from the page into your bones. It is how you stop hoping for strength and start building it, one quiet morning and one reflective evening at a time. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about releasing the poison you're carrying for them. Think about that image for a moment. Resentment, grudge, bitterness, these are not just emotions. They are toxins we voluntarily ingest, hoping the other person will feel sick. We hold onto the story of how we were wronged, replaying it in our minds, feeding the anger, believing that our refusal to forgive is a form of power, a way of holding the wrongdoer accountable. But the Stoics observed a devastating truth about this dynamic. The person who holds the resentment is the one who remains trapped in the past, emotionally chained to the very person they despise. Their mental energy, which could be spent on building a meaningful present and future, is instead siphoned off to fuel a never-ending trial against someone who may not even be in the courtroom. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, is the courageous act of dismissing that case, not because the offense was okay, but because you are tired of serving as both the warden and the prisoner of your own anger. This Stoic view is radically different from the conventional understanding of forgiveness. It is not about condoning the action, reconciling with the person, or even telling them they are forgiven. It is a private, internal transaction between you and your own well-being. It is the rational decision to cease your own anger because you have finally recognized that the anger is harming you far more than it is affecting the subject of your resentment. Seneca, who wrote extensively on the corrosive nature of anger, described it as a brief insanity. He argued that an angry person is temporarily divorced from reason, acting in a way that is ultimately self-destructive. He advised that the wise person understands that holding onto anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned first and most severely. The Stoic move is to simply drop the coal. It is an act of self-preservation, a reclamation of your own mental real estate from a squatter who has been living there rent-free for far too long. We can find powerful, real-world proof of this principle in the stories of those who had every reason to nurture a bottomless well of hatred. Nelson Mandela stands as a towering example. After 27 years of imprisonment, he emerged not with a heart full of vengeance, but with a mind focused on reconciliation and nation-building. He understood that for South Africa to heal and for his own spirit to remain free, he had to let go of the justified anger toward his captors. His forgiveness was not a weakness, it was the ultimate strategic and spiritual strength. It allowed him to channel the colossal energy that would have been spent on hatred into the monumental task of creating a new society. Similarly, the experiences of many prisoners of war and survivors of conflict often reveal this same pattern. Those who eventually thrive are not the ones who cling to their rage, but those who find a way to release it. They discover that forgiveness is not something you do for the person who wronged you. It is something you do for yourself. It is the key that unlocks the door to your own continued growth, allowing you to move forward without being forever defined by the worst thing that ever happened to you. Now bring this concept out of the history books and into the quiet space of your own mind. Is there a resentment you've been carrying? It might be a major betrayal from years ago, or it could be a smaller, persistent irritation, a colleague who took credit for your work, a family member who constantly undermines you, a friend who let you down. The size of the offense is less important than the weight of the burden it places on you. The Stoic invitation is to conduct a simple but profound thought experiment. Close your eyes and bring that person or situation to mind. Feel the familiar heat of the anger or the cold knot of the hurt. Now, imagine what it would feel like to gently, deliberately set that burden down. Not because what they did is now acceptable, but because you have decided you no longer wish to carry it. Visualize yourself unlocking the handcuffs that have bound you to this past event and simply walking away, leaving the weight of it behind you. What sensations arise? A feeling of lightness, a sense of spaciousness in your mind. That spaciousness is your energy returning to you. That is the energy you can now invest in your creativity, your relationships, and your peace. The choice to forgive, in this Stoic sense, is perhaps the most selfishly generous act you can perform. It gives you back to yourself. You can't always change what happens, but you can always change what it means. This single sentence is one of the most powerful cognitive tools you will ever possess, a key that can unlock a prison of your own making and walk you out into a field of new possibilities. At its core, this is the art of reinterpretation, the conscious, deliberate practice of reframing the events of your life. The Stoics understood that an event in itself is just a set of facts, a neutral occurrence. The rain falls, a project fails, a door closes. These facts are inert, but the moment we interpret them, we assign them a value, a weight, a story. We call the rain miserable, the failure catastrophic, the closed door the end. And in that act of interpretation, we hand over our power. We allow the external event to dictate our internal weather. The genius of the exiled Stoic was to snatch that power back, to realize that while they could not always control the facts, they retained absolute sovereignty over the story they told about those facts. They could choose to see a closed door not as a finality, but as a direction to find a window, or even to build a new door entirely. This practice of mental reassignment is deeply rooted in the teachings of Epictetus, who spent his early life as a slave. He drew a crucial distinction between an external impression, what happens to us, and our assent to that impression, the meaning we give it. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." He taught that an impression, like a piece of data, arrives in our mind. We have a split second to choose whether to accept it at face value, to assign it the default meaning that our emotions or society suggests, or to pause and consciously reassign a different, more empowering meaning. Someone insults you. The default interpretation is that you have been disrespected, and you must respond in kind. The Stoic reinterpretation might be that the person is having a terrible day, that their words reflect their own inner turmoil, not your worth, or even that they have offered you a free exercise in practicing patience. You are not denying the fact that words were spoken. You are simply changing the narrative around those words, draining them of their power to hurt you, and instead using them as fuel for your own growth. We see this powerful alchemy at work in the lives of history's most remarkable exiles, who took the raw, painful material of their banishment and spun it into a narrative of purpose. The Roman poet Ovid, once the darling of Roman high society, was banished to the remote, barbaric shores of the Black Sea. His initial interpretation was one of utter devastation. He saw himself as a cultured flower ripped from its greenhouse and tossed onto a barren rock to die. But over time, a shift occurred. He began to reinterpret his exile not as a punishment, but as a unique opportunity for a different kind of work. Removed from the distractions and political intrigues of Rome, he could immerse himself in the local myths and customs, which eventually fueled his masterpiece, the Metamorphoses. His physical isolation became the very condition for his deepest creative connection. Similarly, the Chinese philosopher Confucius, when he found himself exiled from his home state of Lu, could have seen it as a professional death sentence. Instead, he and his disciples reinterpreted their years of wandering not as a period of failure, but as a grand journey, an opportunity to spread his teachings to new territories and to test his principles in different courts. His exile became a pilgrimage, a narrative of mission rather than misfortune. This practice is not about naive positive thinking or pretending that difficult things are not difficult. It is about strategic storytelling. It is about recognizing that the story you tell yourself about an event directly determines the amount of suffering it causes and the range of actions you believe are available to you. A business failure told as a story of personal inadequacy leads to shame and paralysis. The same failure, reinterpreted as a costly and valuable education, leads to analysis, adaptation, and renewed effort. A difficult health diagnosis told as a story of decline and limitation breeds fear. The same diagnosis, reinterpreted as a wake-up call to prioritize health, deepen relationships, and appreciate each day, can breed a profound sense of clarity and purpose. The facts remain the same. The story, and therefore the entire experience of your life, changes completely. Now, bring this power of reinterpretation into your own life with a simple but transformative exercise. Think of one recent event that you instinctively labeled as bad or unfortunate. It might be a minor frustration like a traffic jam that made you late, or a larger concern like a disagreement with a loved one. Take a piece of paper and write down the bare facts of the event, just the neutral who, what, when, and where. Now, below that, write down your initial interpretation, the story you told yourself about what it meant. Finally, and this is the crucial step, brainstorm 3 completely different, potentially positive or neutral interpretations of the exact same set of facts. If the traffic jam made you late, could it also have been a hidden blessing that prevented you from being in a potential accident further down the road? Could it have been a forced moment of pause in your hectic day, a few minutes of unexpected quiet to listen to music or just be with your thoughts? If the disagreement was painful, could it be a necessary clearing of the air, an opportunity to understand the other person's perspective more deeply, or a sign of a relationship strong enough to withstand conflict? The goal is not to land on the right interpretation, but to prove to yourself that multiple interpretations are always available. You are not stuck with the first story that pops into your head. You are the author, and with a little practice, you can choose to write a narrative that empowers you rather than diminishes you. The only moment you ever have is this one. Exile teaches you to live in it fully. When you are torn from your past and have no guarantee of a future, the present moment ceases to be a philosophical concept and becomes your entire reality. It is the ground beneath your feet, the only place where your will can actually meet the world and make a difference. The Stoics understood this with a clarity that modern life often obscures. We spend so much time mentally time traveling, replaying old arguments like a broken record or anxiously rehearsing future scenarios that may never happen. This mental absence is a subtle form of self-abandonment. We flee from the only moment we are actually alive, seeking refuge in a past we cannot change or a future we cannot control. Exile shatters this illusion. It forces you to stop leaning backward or forward and to finally stand upright, fully inhabiting the now, because now is all you have left. In that stark focus, a surprising thing happens. You discover that the present moment is not a prison of limitation, but the only arena where true power is ever available. Marcus Aurelius, guiding an empire through plague and war, constantly returned to this anchor point in his meditations. He wrote, "Don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. Stick with the situation at hand." His advice is a powerful antidote to overwhelm. When you are faced with an immense, terrifying future, your mind can easily be crushed by the sheer scale of it. But the present moment is always manageable. It is just this breath, just this step, just this single, simple action. He also reminded himself of life's breathtaking brevity, noting that the past is gone and the future is deeply uncertain. The only thing that is real, the only thing you truly possess, is this fleeting, precious moment. To waste it in regret or anxiety is to trade the only genuine currency of life for a fantasy. The Stoic focus, therefore, is not on having a long life, but on having a full one, and a full life is built by filling each present moment with purposeful action and mindful awareness, regardless of the circumstances. We see this profound presence embodied in the lives of exiles who found a way to thrive within the confines of a single day. Consider the experience of those in long-term solitary confinement. Their world is reduced to a tiny cell, their future a terrifying blank. Those who survive psychologically and even find a form of peace are the ones who master the art of the present. They might focus completely on the feel of cool water on their skin during a shower, the precise pattern of light moving across the floor throughout the day, or the intricate task of crafting something from meager materials. Their agency is not found in changing their overall sentence, but in how fully they can inhabit the next minute. They exercise power by choosing to notice, to appreciate, to create, right where they are. Similarly, refugees forced to flee their homes with nothing often speak of a paradoxical sense of clarity that emerges amidst the chaos. The grand plans and long-term worries fall away. The entire project of life narrows to the next meal, finding safe shelter for the night, protecting the person next to you. This hyper-focus on immediate, essential needs, while born of tragedy, can unleash a remarkable resourcefulness and a deep appreciation for the most fundamental gifts of existence: safety, a full stomach, a moment of human connection. Their power is not in controlling their destiny, but in responding with their entire being to the demand of the present hour. This practice is perhaps the most urgent and necessary for our modern world of constant distraction. Our exile is not from a homeland, but from our own experience. We are physically in one place, but mentally 1,000 miles away, scrolling through digital feeds, worrying about next quarter's goals, or reliving a minor embarrassment from 5 years ago. We are everywhere but here. The consequence is a life lived in a state of perpetual mental absence, a vague dissatisfaction and anxiety that comes from never truly landing in our own skin. The Stoic invitation is to end this self-imposed exile and come home to the present. It is the ultimate act of reclaiming your power, because your attention is the most valuable resource you have, and where you place it defines your reality. To choose to be fully here is to stop being a victim of time and to become its master, squeezing every drop of meaning and agency from the only moment that will ever actually exist. The practice for this is deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. Today, I want you to carve out just 10 minutes. Choose a simple, mundane activity you do every day: making a cup of tea, walking to your car, washing a dish, or simply sitting and breathing. For these 10 minutes, your only task is to be completely, utterly immersed in that activity. If you are making tea, notice the sound of the water boiling, the feel of the warm mug in your hands, the aroma of the steam rising, the complex flavor on your tongue. When your mind inevitably wanders to a worry or a plan, which it will, gently guide it back to the sensory details of the moment without any judgment. You are not doing this to achieve a state of Zen perfection. You are doing it to train your mind in the art of presence. You are proving to yourself that you have the ability to choose where your attention goes. Notice how it feels. Does time seem to slow down? Do ordinary sensations become more vivid? Does a simple action feel more meaningful? This is not an escape from reality. It is a deeper arrival into it. This is the power that exiles learned out of necessity, and it is a power available to you in this very moment if you choose to claim it. History's exiles teach us that the greatest conquest is over ourselves. After exploring 20 profound lessons on resilience, perspective, and inner freedom, this final insight brings everything into a single, sharp focus. Every practice, every shift in thinking, every act of courage we've discussed ultimately serves this one overarching purpose: to win the private, silent battles that rage within our own minds. External victories, achieving a goal, gaining approval, acquiring wealth, are always vulnerable to the whims of fortune. They can be given, and they can be taken away in an instant. But an inner victory, a triumph of your character, your integrity, and your virtue, is a prize that is utterly and permanently yours. No exile, no failure, no loss can ever strip it from you. This is the ultimate legacy of the Stoic journey, the realization that while we may not control the world we live in, we always hold sovereign command over the person we choose to be within it. This brings us to a beautiful and empowering idea from Seneca, who wrote, "The wise person carries their goods with them." He wasn't speaking of physical possessions which can be so easily confiscated or lost. He was referring to the only riches that truly matter: a well-ordered mind, a courageous heart, a just character, and the capacity for clear judgment. These are the treasures that no border can contain and no prison cell can confiscate. An exile who internalizes this truth is, in a very real sense, the wealthiest person in the room, because their entire estate is located in the one place that is completely immune to external disaster. Their power is not diminished by their circumstances, it is revealed by them. The challenge of exile becomes the ultimate test, proving that their worth was never in their title or their address, but in the unshakable quality of their soul. This is the Stoic definition of success: not what you have, but who you are, regardless of what you have lost. When we look back at the exiles we remember and admire, we see this principle etched into history. We do not remember Nelson Mandela for the 27 years he spent in a cell. We remember him for the profound dignity, forgiveness, and leadership he cultivated within it. We do not celebrate the poet Ovid for his glamorous life in Rome, but for the heartbreakingly beautiful verses he composed on the barren shores of his banishment. We do not study the philosophy of Boethius because he was a powerful senator, but because he wrote The Consolation of Philosophy, a timeless meditation on fortune and virtue while awaiting his execution. Their external suffering is a footnote, their inner victory is the main text of their legacy. They are remembered not for what was done to them, but for what they chose to do with it. Their most enduring contribution was not a political victory or an artistic masterpiece in itself, but the undeniable proof that a human spirit can choose integrity over bitterness, courage over despair, and love over hatred, even in the most crushing of conditions. Their lives stand as eternal monuments to the fact that our impact on the world is not determined by the height of our platform, but by the depth of our character. So as we bring these 21 lessons to a close, the most important question is not an abstract one. It is a deeply personal invitation. Look at the challenges you are facing right now in your own life. They may not be as dramatic as literal exile, but they are your training ground, your proving soil. The difficult colleague, the financial pressure, the personal loss, the quiet anxiety, these are your equivalents of the barren shore or the prison cell. Now ask yourself, what kind of inner victory could make this challenge meaningful? What if this struggle is not a barrier to your happiness, but the very path to a stronger, more resilient, and more authentic version of yourself? Could patience be your victory over frustration? Could self-validation be your victory over the need for approval? Could acceptance be your victory over resistance? Could a simple act of kindness performed when you feel hurt be your victory over bitterness? Your inner victory does not need to be grand to be profound. It simply needs to be a conscious choice to respond to a difficult external event with a virtue that makes you proud of who you are. That choice, made again and again, is how you build a legacy that no circumstance can ever erase. So we have traveled through 21 lessons, from the invincibility of your own judgment to the profound power of living fully in the present moment. But these are not just historical curiosities or abstract philosophical ideas. They form a collective toolkit, a complete operating system for the mind, designed for one powerful purpose: to transform any form of exile you might face, whether literal or the far more common internal exile of overwhelm, disconnection, or powerlessness, into an unshakable source of inner power. This is the ultimate promise of Stoicism. It is not a philosophy of passive withdrawal from the world, but one of active engagement with the only thing you can ever truly control, yourself. It provides the practical wisdom to perform a profound alchemy on your experience, turning constraints into a surprising sense of freedom, isolation into a deeper connection with your own spirit and with humanity, and adversity into the very fuel for your growth. The Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus, who knew exile intimately, captured this spirit of transformation when he said, "Exile is not an evil, for it places you in a condition to practice virtue more intensely." Let that thought settle in for a moment. He reframes the ultimate external punishment not as a catastrophe, but as an unparalleled opportunity. It is a forced retreat to the training ground of the soul, where the distractions are stripped away and you are left with the raw materials of your own character. This is the timeless resilience that Stoicism offers, a resilience that is not dependent on everything going right, but on your ability to find the rightness within yourself, no matter what is going wrong. This journey does not end when this video does. The real work begins now, in the choices you make in your own life. And the best way to start is not by trying to master all 21 lessons at once, but by choosing just one. Just one practice to focus on for this week. Perhaps it is the art of detached observation, pausing before you react. Maybe it is the courage to embrace a small voluntary discomfort to rebuild your resilience muscle. It could be the simple, profound practice of gratitude for 3 small things you still have. Pick the one that resonates most deeply with the exile you are currently facing and commit to it for the next 7 days. We would be honored to hear about your experience in the comments below. Share what you learned, what challenged you, and what strength you discovered. This is how we build a community of practice, learning from history's outcasts and from each other. If you found this exploration of inner power valuable, consider subscribing to the channel. This is not the end of the journey. It is simply the beginning of a continuing conversation about how to live with more strength, more clarity, and more peace. Together, we can keep exploring the wisdom of the past to build a more resilient future. Thank you for